This video is derived from a quite old script that I wrote about morality. It doesn't reflect my current views, and it is very incoherent and has a lot of flaws. I uploaded it anyway because I don't think it will do any harm, and I think it might get people thinking about this important topic. I invite you to criticize it as much as you want and find its many flaws. Today I want to talk about morality. And by talk I mean ramble incoherently for quite a while. Think of this as an incoherent amalgamation of some of my thoughts on morality. I think what I say here varies in its accuracy and usefulness, but I think much of it is interesting and relates to very important topics. What I say here is by no means cemented belief, or necessarily even what I believe at all. It is just a mass of ideas relating to morality, and I think some of it is interesting for considering that extremely significant issue. Morality, in fact, I would say, is an issue of such significance that no words could possibly describe its importance. It is in a sense indescribable in its weight as a concept. May I reiterate, this is not cemented belief. It is a flow of thoughts I have made public. I have made it public because I cannot conceive of any negative consequence of making this public, and perhaps it will get some people thinking about this very important topic. You never know. Feel free to criticize and to pick apart everything I say. I think this is a very important process for the development of rational ideas for both you and I. I wrote this script quite some time ago, and my morality has advanced well beyond it, I think. I still, however, think it is an interesting script and one worth making into a video. If what you want is my more cemented and strongly held views on morality, I have left a link to a playlist in the description. Let us begin. I think it is undeniable fact that some moral systems are superior to others. Moral systems exist to serve people. Like all concepts, they exist to aid our understanding of one of two things: what reality is, and/or what it ought to be. Morality fills the second function. It helps us understand what our societies ought to be. Some moral systems are superior to others as they serve people better. They serve our interests better and are desirable for that reason. Moral systems exist to serve people, making those that do that the best inarguably superior moral systems, and the ones we should adopt. They can do it better by serving more people and serving people better. The systems that do this are the best and the ones that we should adopt. Here we arrive at a fundamental question. Is the greatest moral system that which serves more people and serves them better than its competition? Or is there an even greater moral system, a moral system which it is in the rational interest of everyone to pursue, and is for that reason most founded in reality? Perhaps it could be argued that morality is pursuit of self-interest with a rational and nuanced consideration of how standards and rules relating to behavior in highly complex social societies have the potential to reflect back the objective ideal outcome in the direction of the individual. Anyone who acts immorally acts in a way contradictory with the promotion of a set of social rules which it is in their rational interest to promote, and is therefore not just immoral, but also irrational. In other words, I am trying to ground a set of moral values in a rational justification, which moves them beyond unreasoned and unjustified subjectivity, so that they can be established as superior to the opposition they face, by way of aligning with the rational self-interest of either significantly more people or literally everyone. Morality is a system of deciding right from wrong when it comes to actions, ideas, and systems. A good morality aligns with the rational interest of the greatest number of people, giving it a foundation in rationality and in reality, because it aligns with the reality of self-interest, rational and real. As morality is a system of social interaction, the most valid one is the one the largest number of people have a rational reason to adhere to. There is a singular universal rational self-interest which unifies all into one moral order in pursuit of the goals of said moral order. Therefore, morality is more objective, or at least more serious and respectable, in the sense that there is one morality, and it connects directly to individual rational self-interest and how this interest relates to the promotion of rules and standards of behaviour which differentiate between right and wrong, in other words, morality. Morality must be tied to self-interest because otherwise it is mere subjective preferences with literally no foundation in anything that matters. If morality is entirely subjective preferences which have no underlying basis in what matters, then being pro-genocide or anti-genocide are mere baseless preferences, little different to preferred flavours of cake. Most people simply inherit a set of often incoherent moral rules from their society, or the smaller social faction they inhabit. They take these rules for granted as objective fact, and that is it. This is a dangerously weak foundation. Some people believe many things which I believe to be perfectly defensible from a rational moral viewpoint, but they often believe them for the wrong reasons, or should I say, no reason at all. Morality must be based in a more objective, or perhaps the right word here is just serious, standard, and the only way I can conceive of this being done is through individual interest, rational self-interest. By aligning as many rational individual interests as possible, we can set up the ideal set of moral rules to serve the greatest number of interests and to therefore be rooted in rationality in the deepest sense. This allows us to use reason to discover the objective moral interest and therefore the moral rules our society should be based on, not according to subjective preference, but objective interest, derived from the moral system most aligned with the interest of the rational actor. The interests not just perceived, but rational and real. The objective interest of a sentient being. Maximum pleasure, minimal pain. Rational interest takes into account various things, from strictly material well-being such as wealth and access to food, water, shelter, and the like. It also takes into account other factors, such as existence in a social circumstance ideal for creating optimal well-being through the promotion of positive emotions. Currently, moral views are largely based on accepted norm, emotional preference, and little else. This is a flimsy foundation, which removes our right to claim superiority or inferiority in any meaningful sense, as I have mentioned. It also leads to mass inconsistency and a very vulnerable moral order, to say the least. Even if everyone was who we would typically consider immoral, a cutthroat capitalist or organized criminal, they still need to take into account promoting a set of moral rules that align with their rational interest. It is in the interest of an immoral man to promote a moral system in some sense. An immoral, selfish individual who confesses his selfishness publicly and argues in defense of it and for its embrace by others is either a fool or a man who has in fact not embraced immorality entirely. A selfish, immoral person who intends on harming others for his material gain should not confess or argue for this. To do so does not make sense. It is against his interest, as it makes him look highly suspicious, it makes him look like a bad, evil person, and it encourages others to undertake immorality against him. Deflecting suspicion, appearing kind and honourable, and promoting morality while secretly pursuing his immoral interest are all obvious interests of a deeply immoral and selfish man. Saying he is selfish is in opposition to his interest. This means he is either a fool who has not rationally considered the implications of his selfishness, or his selfishness is not complete and total. He still considers a degree of honesty to hold moral worth. In other words, anyone who argues for selfishness has not seriously considered the implications of selfishness, or they have failed to embrace it completely due to some remaining sense of morality, or perhaps simply a purely emotional interest, although these things are not entirely opposed. This is inherent to the act, as honest selfishness and pro-selfishness advocacy are both in opposition to true selfish interest. It is in your selfish interest to deflect suspicion, look kind, and promote your own moral treatment. So for all you know, I could be a completely selfish, irrational, and short-sighted immoral person, and I would still be telling you all of the same things I am now telling you, because telling such lies to encourage morality elsewhere, appear more kind and honourable as a person, and ease suspicion of oneself, is undeniably in the interest of the selfish. I could say you can conclude I am not completely selfish, because if I was, why would I tell you such a thing in the first place? But you could swiftly respond by saying the comment I just made was one in which I was trying to justify my own innocence and honour, as doing so was in my selfish, immoral interest. I will leave you to decide, but to get back on track. Now we get to a difficult point. Are there not various rational interests that differ from individual to individual? If morality is objective, individual interest must also be one rational objective interest. Rational interest must not conflict, or the system cannot be objective in any serious sense, and is instead founded on a comparatively more subjective and varying individual interest, although it could be argued morality is simply the greatest number of these individual interests unified into a singular set of standards to serve the most people to the greatest degree. It could be said morality is the plural of self-interest. If the interests of many cannot be unified into one moral good, they are once again doomed as a mass of comparatively subjective interests with a far looser foundation in reality than if they can all be centralized into one singular core of a rational moral interest. Let's look at some of the most challenging opposed interess and discuss what the objective interest is and why that is the objective interest. Slave versus master, worker versus capitalist, exploiter nation versus exploited nation. For each case, we can separate the interests of both groups into an ignorant and a rational interest, an interest perceived and an interest real. The ignorant view is that of a short-sighted man who in blind pursuit of material gain impedes his own access to the moral ideal society any rational actor should want. An ignorant view is the view of the man who is enslaved to the desire for wealth, rather than a moral ideal society. In the case of the slave versus the master, there are two interests. The slave undeniably has the interest of being released. For starters, slavery is immoral for a range of reasons relating to the lessening of empathy and compassion in society, the normalization of oppression, exploitation, and cruelty, and the commodification of humanity itself. We could also mention reciprocity here. As well as normalizing bad things and undermining good things, it also violates important ideas of reciprocal morality, and can thus be declared immoral. It is clearly worth considering immoral in the interests of most, and as I am about to argue, perhaps even the few who we normally view as the winners of this most vile arrangement. Whether the slave believes this due to moral values or simply a blind pursuit of their material well-being that we would correctly view as immoral in different circumstances, does not really matter that much. It matters a bit, but not very much. They believe the moral thing, and while it would be ideal if they believed it for moral reasons, we are not overly concerned with intent here, and a good view is still a good view. The slave owner is more interesting to pick apart morally. It is often in the slave master's blind and short-sighted, strictly material interest to maintain slaves. In doing so, however, he has made an irrational choice. This is the ignorant option, one blinded by greed which has clouded the capacity for reason. It could be said the rational actor will pursue a moral existence as the superior and righteous path, even in the face of infinite material reward and comfort. Acting morally is greater than any material interest. It is the one thing that cannot be taken away. You can always be moral. But that is not the argument I will make here. It could similarly be argued that in acting this cruelly, the slave master undermines his own right to reciprocal moral treatment and is therefore irrational. This argument is interesting but somewhat more abstract than anything I feel like saying today. I want to talk about pure self-interest. You could say reciprocity relates to pure self-interest, but as I say, I don't want to get into that today. When it comes to pure self-interest, it is in the rational interest of the slave master to act in accordance with the goal of creating and being a part of the most moral ideal society conceivable. Existence in such a society will guarantee the best quality of life possible, with fulfillment in more than the pure material at the cost of other possibilities. In keeping slaves, the slave master violates the terms necessary to achieving this goal, which is in his own rational self-interest. He is not rational, but instead ignorant of the possibilities he has declined himself access to through his foolish decisions. It is rational for him to promote the ideal moral society, so he can exist in this superior society, and to act contradictory to this goal is irrational. I suspect a counter-argument about how achieving such a society relies on everyone abandoning selfishness, and why would I do that when others will not, and you will face negative consequences as you try to follow moral rules, while many others do not care about such rules. The idea that you ought to act selfishly or else others will, and you will be screwed over, is idiotic, self-justifying, circular logic, which is nothing but a desperate justification of your own ignorant greed. This circular logic will lead to nothing but a cycle of suffering based purely in irrationality. The argument I have made for the slave and master example can be repeated for the example of worker and capitalist. In oppressing and exploiting the worker and making them subject to autocratic and authoritarian power relations, the capitalist has similarly undermined positive emotions such as empathy and kindness, normalized oppression, exploitation, and cruelty, and violated reciprocal moral norms. In other words, they have ignorantly and greedily acted in a way that is nothing but detrimental to the only rational goal of existing within an ideal moral society. For the next perceived conflict in rational interest, we have exploiter nations versus exploited nations. In exploiting other nations, the exploiter nation normalizes exploitation, cruelty, and oppression, undermines positive emotions such as empathy, compassion, and acts such as kindness and caring by reducing them to nothing but commodities for convenience, and violates reciprocal moral rules, normally central to the very societies doing the exploiting. This undermines the capacity of the society to become its ideal moral self, and is for that reason irrational, as it clashes with the rational interest every rational individual should have of existing and flourishing in such a society. Thus, a rational person must be an internationalist, as this is the only way of realizing the ideal moral society. A society in which we have maximum empathy and compassion, kindness and caring, a society in which no evil is ever normalized, a society in which reciprocity is at its strongest and best. Those are our perceived clashes of rational self-interest, unified in a sense by tying both sets of individuals or groups to one rational goal. In this case, the goal of an ideal, highly moral society, optimal for the flourishing of all individuals. In these real scenarios, these immoral people and groups are ignorant of the rational moral standard that it is in their rational interest to promote. There are undeniably hypothetical scenarios that could be brought up here, which would be beyond difficult to answer, but this moral system does not exist in a void or fictional setting. It exists in the very specific circumstance that is our world. Perhaps some hypotheticals could make evil things be justified, but that doesn't necessarily discredit the system. This failure in rationality on the behalf of the immoral, and their failure to understand the rationality behind promoting empathy and the like, is not to say we ought to deal with them through debating, showing them how to think rationally, or something like that. It is to say they are not rational actors. They may still need to be dealt with through other means if they cannot be convinced. Convincing them is unlikely, as these oppressors are often consumed in a destructive, immoral, and irrational greed, an obsession with material well-being, an ignorance of what is really good for them. The oppressors fail to understand what is objectively in their interest. Promoting a society of ultimate social well-being, which is not infringed upon by blind pursuit of material desires, which are met to a necessary standard anyways. Alternatively, it could be argued the moral good is not aligned with the rational interest of all individuals, but simply the vast majority. This is an easier argument to make. The majority must set up systems to restrain the few who it is in the interests of to act immorally. This still serves to give the moral system greater validity and more of a foundation in reality than it would otherwise have, and than most of its opponents have. The more rational interests the moral system aligns with, the more rational and real it is, as morality is a social system that exists to serve people, making the best moral system that which serves as many and as well as possible. This is less objective, you could say, but it is still far superior to many of the more vile moral systems that inhabit the realm of ideas. It is more desirable than many of its competitors because it has a far greater basis in rational self-interest. When we bring up maximizing empathy, one counter-argument often arises. Empathy for my group inspires me to oppress and exploit another. This is a complete perversion of rational empathy, and sure to undermine the actual empathy within one's society. Rational empathy is differentiated from emotional empathy in that it is promoted because the individual understands its alignment with maximizing good for all, including them, by propagating these desirable things such as empathy and compassion, caring and kindness. This emotional empathy does not, and I would say represents the emotional manipulation of empathy into a justification for immorality, which will harm both groups involved in the interaction and actually undermine empathy, compassion, caring, and kindness. The oppressed are hurt in obvious ways. The oppressors corrupt their own society morally and socially and prevent the full realization of their ultimate social well-being for no reason other than greed, an unhealthy addiction with material well-being to the detriment of social and emotional well-being. The common response to this is that empathy, compassion, and the like will not be worn down within one's own society if the members of one's own society are unaware of the occurring oppression and exploitation. It is true that if people do not know of the oppression, it will not corrode their empathy. Ideally, a people should know they are helping others to maximize positive emotions such as empathy, but this is beside the point. The issue with this proposal is that it is a proposal of dishonest government. The issue with this is obvious. Rational individuals should not want a government that lies to their face, meaning this idea is irrational and unjustified, as it is fundamentally incompatible with both a moral system and the rational interest of the masses. As you can see, I am trying to justify a certain set of moral views as better than others because morality is a social transaction. People should put something in and get something out, meaning the most rational morality is the one that does this the best, to the best degree, for the highest number of rational actors. Some people attempt to ground their morality in even more real and objective measurements. I think they are all unsuccessful, however, and this reciprocal golden rule style system, which takes into account promoted emotions, is really as far as you can reasonably go when it comes to basing a moral system in reality. And by reality, I of course mean rational self-interest. Many of these other justifications seem to border on wishful thinking and a desperate abomination of logical points designed to make morality objective. Many of the people who claim an objective morality in the world today are of course religious people. Divine command theory. The reason this is not a satisfactory answer is because it relies upon a descriptive claim, the existence of God, which has not been proven. This means that there is not a good enough justification to adhere to these theories because the only appeal they have is divine backing, as it is through this divine backing that they incentivize individuals to follow them with ideas such as heaven and hell and karma. Without proving the truths of the religion, these things cannot be proven to exist, and there is no logical reason rational actors should follow these rules outside of a purely subjective religious preference, often hinged on the household they were raised within. As we've been over, this completely baseless preferential morality is bad. Morality should be based in rational self-interest because it exists to serve people, and that is the only way to serve people. Rational means of discovering moral truths are far superior. They are more reliable and deliver better conclusions and real-world results. In fact, it is not a question of true or false. It is a question of desirable or undesirable. We simply choose the moral systems that serve us the best and our interests the best. These are the superior moral systems. You could even say objectivity doesn't matter at all. It is just about what ones serve us the best, and those are the ones we should adhere to. Those are the superior moral systems. The promotion of empathy, kindness, compassion, and similar things through both ideology and action, philosophy and practice, rhetoric and behavior, allows for the realization of the ultimate social society, for the ultimate social species. The ultimate goal of material well-being, which I strongly believe can be achieved to a sufficient degree without immoral behaviors, is a state of social perfection, a society based on reciprocity, empathy, kindness, and compassion, to a far greater degree than even our current society, which still features these things to varying extents. Morality is a system only relevant so long as social interaction exists, and it serves the singular function of facilitating ideal social interaction in a transactional sense, as individuals put something in, that being moral consideration of their behavior towards others, and get something out, that being moral consideration from others. Of course, it is even more complex than this when we talk about supporting an empathy-based moral system as a means of propagating the mutually beneficial emotion of empathy to the maximum degree in our society. There are a lot of nuanced and complicated consequences of actions, ideas, and systems that should be taken into account. Among them, their tendency to propagate emotions, their immediate and obvious consequences, their impact on reciprocity, and normalization, to mention just a few. We could also talk about implications. Implications are important because our society should be rational and consistent. These things are good. Ultimate human happiness is not something to be achieved through mere wealth in the strictly material sense, although this does undoubtedly have value, and quite a lot of it, but also from a healthy social existence, which can only be facilitated through the promotion of mutually beneficial social emotions and behaviors such as empathy, compassion, and kindness, as well as reciprocity. The necessity to maximize the existence of these behaviors, emotions, and things while following the normal rules of reciprocity and ideological and moral consistency creates one objective goal, you could say, an ultimate goal, and one objective and ultimate moral system towards the goal which is centered in the interests of the rational actor to reach this desired social outcome through said moral system. If morality is rooted in self-interest, which like all other concept and things it should be, then one moral system will serve self-interest better than any other. It will serve self-interest better, and it will serve more self-interest. Therefore, it is superior and more desirable. Whether or not this makes it objective is very much debatable. Rational actors are to consistently treat others how they would like to be treated, and more importantly, act to maximize empathy, compassion, kindness, and similar things, to create the ideal, moral, social society in which all share in well-being both material and social of the most desirable type. This is in their rational interest because humans are social creatures. Social existence makes humans happy, and the only way an ideal social existence can be met is through reciprocity and the constant and vigorous promotion of empathy, compassion, caring, and kindness, even when materially inconvenient. While a degree of social well-being can be reached without such morality, it will undeniably be the shadow of what it could be. As for material interest, as important as these things are, a purely material obsession and complete rejection of social well-being is highly unhealthy and will harm the individual, and no individual will ever be able to reach the highest form of happiness through such things. The social means is undeniably necessary to meet this highest form of happiness, and for this social means we need morality. Morality is also helpful for the material, but not so much so as for the social. Anyone who deems the ultimate social existence to not be in their rational interest is evidently mentally ill in some way, due to the lack of value they have placed on social interaction, which is a defining characteristic of our species and one of the characteristics central to our success. It is our capacity for and enjoyment of social interaction that makes us who we are. This is not an appeal to nature, it is a fact about who we are and how we find happiness and fulfillment. Material needs are important and can be upheld while promoting positive emotions, behaviors, and reciprocity to the greatest possible extent. These things are far from mutually exclusive. The material and social will undeniably align in such a moral society. Those who do not act in accordance with achieving a society optimal for such a perfect existence have had their rationality tainted by ignorance and greed. This pursuit of material needs to the detriment of maximization of social well-being through the promotion of these positive ideas should be viewed as similar to addiction, a highly destructive mental illness preventing the well-being of the individual and group socially. Rational actors pursue material needs and ultimate social well-being, which can only be achieved through a devotion to promoting the positive ideas previously mentioned. Those who pursue material needs to the complete detriment of the social will see their capacity for well-being never realized, as they doom themselves to a material existence which is utterly meaningless compared to that which could be arrived at socially, if their personal vice had not gotten in the way of their adherence to the promotion of the ideas that were in their interest. Rational actors adhere to the singular objective moral interest of promoting the ideas I have spoken of here through their acts. Those who do not are not rational, as they prevent the social state for their own well-being from being reached and doom themselves to a life which is a mere materialist husk compared to what it could have been. They have deprived themselves of their own right to exist in the ideal society in blind pursuit of far more material pleasures which wield far weaker rewards. They are ignorant. The immoral are irrational. They fail to buy into a larger moral system that it is in their own rational interest to buy into. They deprive themselves of belonging when they refuse to participate in the fight for an ideal social society. They deprive themselves of purpose, meaning, and meaningful social interaction. They hurt themselves. They undermine their right to reciprocal moral treatment. They destroy the empathy, compassion, kindness, and caring that had the potential to do them so much good. They normalize oppression, exploitation, and cruelty in a way that can and may well harm them. It is undeniable this is an idea of great complexity philosophically, which will likely be subject to plenty of alterations and adjustments, which may end with its looking radically different in light of compelling evidence and arguments being brought up against it. In fact, spoiler alert, this is an old script, and I can tell you my moral philosophy is not exactly the same as what you see in this script, this incoherent mess. Still, I hope you found some of this interesting, intriguing, or compelling. I hope some of it got you thinking a little bit. I hope you found some of it useful in some way. I think of this as a kind of messy, flawed prototype on the way to trying to set up or discover a moral system more respectable, coherent, consistent, and rational than many of the others we currently encounter. In fact, I wrote that line a while ago, but that is exactly what this script is. It's a grubby old prototype, which provides some good ideas, but it's ultimately just a bit of an incoherent mess. Perhaps the justification we want to find is already out there, or perhaps we will need to continue trying to mash ideas together to uncover whether a deeper moral justification truly does exist. Time will tell. My words here are by no means a final or even coherent synthesis of ideas. One thing I think is that the more defensible view I mentioned a number of times is fairly sturdy, but the more extreme moral view I primarily focused on borders on blind wishful thinking, although it has some validity. We should be ready to get our hands dirty to find moral answers and flesh out an empathetic, kind, and compassionate moral foundation, which provides superior and more objective moral insight, differentiating us from an old immoral worldview and cementing a logical basis for a desirable future that is both rational, moral, and built on a sturdy foundation. One of the biggest flaws I think with this script is my constant use of the word objective. I don't know if any of this could be called objective. A moral system can be more rationally desirable than another moral system. I don't know if that makes it worthy of the name objective in any real sense. Anyways, this script in this video is a bit of an incoherent mess, but it has some interesting ideas in it, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it got you thinking, and I hope you found it interesting. Congratulations if you got this far.